Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing a postpartum Q&A. I am 4 months postpartum, about to be 5. Yeah, these were just kind of the questions that I got that were very like repetitive or very common. I felt like making a video was like the best way to answer all of those because as someone who was pregnant, I would be looking for videos like this. So hopefully it helps someone out. First question, how do you feel after the C-section? I would say like my pain with a C-section wasn't as bad as I thought it was gonna be. The incision was great, it healed perfectly fine, and honestly I had so much help. I feel like that's really what helped me recover so fast and not feel so much pain. I'm not saying that the incision or anything like didn't hurt because obviously it's a whole surgery. I've heard so many horror stories and just like, you know, people's experiences with a C-section, and honestly like if I were to get another C-section down the line, years down the line, I don't think I'd be scared to get one because my recovery and like just like the whole process was like, it was good. A lot of people also asked for my labor story. I know that I posted a vlog, but just to quickly go over my labor story in this video, my due date was September 19th. Obviously didn't have my baby on my due date, so when that happened I was scheduled for an induction at 42 weeks. However, Kaiser called me back and they're like, hey, like we don't have space, we're gonna have to like move you earlier. So I got a new induction date for 40 weeks and 6 days. So on September 24th in the morning I started to get like these weird like feelings, and they were basically like cramps, but they were very minimal cramps. Like it didn't hurt, I could still go on about my day and do whatever I was doing. However, it was a feeling that I had never felt before, and because I was already past my due date, I immediately went into like, oh my gosh, like am I going into labor? Like is this a contraction? Which I feel like is the scariest thing about being pregnant for the first time. Like you don't know what contractions feel like. Obviously it's different for everybody, but for me they started very slow, and towards the end of the night I was getting them like pretty hard. I remember the night before going into my induction appointment, I was getting like contractions, and they weren't very frequent, but they were frequent enough to where I was like, okay, let me just call labor and delivery and like tell them like what's going on. Because my induction date was already due for the next day, I was like, okay, whatever happens, I'm already supposed to go to the hospital tomorrow morning. So that night I went to sleep with contractions, and I woke up with contractions again, but it was exactly like the day before. They were very minimal. So I went to the hospital at 9 a.m. I was 3 centimeters dilated, my mucus plug hadn't came out, and my water hadn't broken yet. I stayed at the hospital for an hour, and they were basically just like monitoring me to make sure that I really did have contractions, and also to measure like my blood pressure and all of that like health stuff. So at this point they were either gonna keep me or send me back home and let me labor on my own. And the only reason I stayed was because one of my blood pressure readings was off, but I truly believe it was because I didn't know that you weren't supposed to like move your hand when, you know, it's the thing was taking your blood pressure. So because I was moving my hand, it kind of gave like a spiked blood pressure reading, and it was the only one within those 2 hours. My midwife was just like, you know what, let's just not risk it, let's just keep her here. Maybe if I would have just gone back home, I could have gone into labor a lot more naturally instead of being at the hospital for nearly 2 days. I feel like that's why my body was taking forever to dilate, and I do have to say that this is probably one of the things that I do regret, and that is letting them keep me. I went the whole day not dilating whatsoever, so they started me on Pitocin, and Pitocin was kind of what started getting things going, but my body was still not dilating fast enough, so they kept amping up the Pitocin levels. September 26th they broke my water at like 4 a.m. and before they broke my water I already had my epidural, so I didn't feel anything after that. So once I dilated and I was already like 10 centimeters, 100% effaced, all that stuff, I started to push, but my baby was still really high. I think that's another thing that I'm thinking about. Like the whole time they kept telling me like, oh, okay, like yeah, you're dilating, but your baby's still really high. And Alethia's head was also facing sideways. As I was pushing, they would like kind of like move her head, if that makes sense. It was basically 4 hours of pushing until the nurses and my midwife were like, you know what, hun, like your body isn't opening up, she keeps bouncing back up from your pelvic bone, and they didn't want to risk her like getting stuck on the way out, because then that would have resulted in an emergency C-section, as to where I could just have a C-section and like avoid all of that. Also, my water had been broken for a while, so they didn't want to risk me getting an infection. That is why I resulted to having a C-section. Homegirl was just like still really high. I was just so tired of being pregnant at that point. Like I just wanted to have this baby out of me. Everything happens for a reason. Even though I do have regrets of that day, I do believe that everything was supposed to happen the way that it happened. My experiences with the nurses were so good. Like I loved every single nurse that I had. They were so nice. They answered all the questions that I would have. I feel like the only nurse that I felt kind of iffy with was my last nurse, which was the one who was helping me deliver Alethea Alethea and like helping me push. I feel like she was kind of a newbie. Whenever somebody would walk into the room, they would always kind of like ask her a lot of questions and she'd be like, yeah, I did that. Kind of like checklisting with her, and I'm just like, okay. I feel like next time I'll be a little bit more vocal about wanting my midwife there, because when I started to push, my midwife wasn't there. She was like with someone else. Overall, my experience with the nurses, they were all really nice. How was it going to the bathroom for the first time? Something I'm nervous about. I don't know if it's because I had a C-section, but I peed fine. I feel like also I might have been really drugged to the point where I didn't feel anything, but like peeing was fine for me. The only thing that I remember about peeing was it smelled so bad. Like it was so infused with medication. Like I was on an IV getting antibiotics because I did end up getting an infection in my uterus. Yeah, I remember like for 2 weeks straight I was just like peeing like medication, and it just smelled like so horrible. If you know, you know. Did you get the epidural? If not, what tactics did you use to help you ease the pain? I was never against epidural. I was like, you know what, at the end of the day, if I need an epidural, I'm gonna get the epidural. Do not be afraid of getting the epidural. I felt nothing. The only thing that I felt was like the cold running down my back. I didn't feel the needle, and I also didn't look at the needle. I didn't look at anything that the anesthesiologist was bringing in the room, because honestly at the end of the day, I don't want to freak myself out more than I already was. But at that point I was like, you know what, if it's gonna hurt, me va a doler. I was really trying my hardest to go as far as I could, because I've also heard that once you get the epidural, it's only good for a certain amount of time, and I was so scared that it would run out by the time that I was pushing, or like if I had to get a C-section, like had my C-section. However, before I got the epidural, I would just like breathe, like just breathe. Walking helped as well. Like I would walk around a little bit for the time being that I could walk around. I feel like staying still was like the worst thing I could do when I was getting contractions. Like I had to be doing something. I did ask for Stato, but of course Kaiser didn't have any, so they gave me fentanyl, and that didn't work at all. So I was like, girl, give me the epidural. Was your pregnancy everything that you imagined it would be? Being pregnant for me was so much fun. I miss being pregnant, but at the same time I don't. Like I'm happy not being pregnant, but I also do miss so like I was saying, I loved being pregnant, and if I were to be pregnant again in like, you know, 2-3 years, I would be happy. I wouldn't be scared for the labor and delivery process, just because I've been through it. I know what to expect. I know the changes that I want to do. I feel like I'd have a more firm birth plan, and I wouldn't freak out about my baby being past her due date. How did it feel when you held Alethea for the first time? I still don't believe Alethea is my daughter. And that sounds so crazy, but I still can't believe that I'm a mom. Like when people ask me like, oh, how does it feel being a mom? Which is so weird, but obviously like I was over the moon. I honestly couldn't believe that she was in my hands, because you know, she was past her due date. Like I had been waiting for that moment for so long that when it finally happened, I was just kind of like, oh, like I'm not pregnant anymore. Like it's over. Now I'm a mom. Like now she's here. And yeah, she was just so tiny, and she was so little. She's still little, but yeah. How was labor? Was it how you expected? I don't really know what I was expecting about labor. One thing I do want to say is that I was expecting myself to labor more at home than at the hospital. Like the fact that I was in the hospital for 2 days, in my head I really thought I was gonna get to the hospital and just like, you know, my dilations were gonna spike up and I was gonna walk out that door like the next 2 days. How did you guys choose your name? It's so beautiful and unique. So Alethea's name originally came from an influencer that I follow. Her daughter's name is Alethea, and I've always just really liked that name because it's very like unique, and I've never really heard anybody with that name. I had it on my list for a really long time, and Ernesto wasn't really like a big fan of it at first. I was like, you know, let me make sure that I really like this name. So I was looking up the name, you know, trying to find out if it meant anything. And so to my surprise, it's actually in the Bible. It is spelled differently in the Bible than the way that we spell her name. And so yeah, Alethea basically means truth. Her middle name is Sol, sun in Spanish, S-O-L. And the reason why we went with that middle name is because I just wanted my baby to represent like happiness. Like I just wanted her to be a happy baby. If you put them together, Alethea, Sol, true joy. And so, I don't know, for me it was like the most perfect thing. And if you guys have ever met Alethea, she is the happiest baby. Like she will laugh with you, she smiles all the time. So I feel like her name just really fits her. Like it just makes me so happy, and that's what I wanted my daughter to like, you know, remind me of, like true happiness, and like wherever she goes, like true joy. And I literally prayed so hard for Ernesto to like that name because it just felt so right, and I was like, he needs to be in love with it too, you know? So one day he was like, yeah, let's do it. And so yeah, that was my confirmation from the Lord that Alethea was gonna be her name, because obviously if Ernesto didn't like it, we were not gonna name her that. What was one thing that happened that you didn't expect during your labor? I didn't really have any expectations for my labor because I really didn't know what was supposed to happen. Of course you have people's stories, but like it's really different when it's you. However, I do have to say that labor was better than I expected. Like if I were to be pregnant right now, I wouldn't be scared about labor and delivery. Like I could go through it again. What have been some difficult parts of breastfeeding? How are you dealing with the pain of breastfeeding? Have you found anything that helps? Breastfeeding, I could literally make a whole separate video about breastfeeding, but I feel like breastfeeding was the one thing that like stole my joy in the first few days, weeks, months of being a mom. It was definitely like a journey. I cried a lot. Like I cried a lot. I have found a lot of things that help with breastfeeding. There's nipple shields, there's nipple butter, there's like cooling pads that you can put on there, there's massagers, there's so many things, and I have them all because girl, I was struggling. I was asking for advice to so many moms. Honestly, like I feel like that's really what helped me, like just asking for advice, just seeing what worked for me. Are you exclusively pumping? I don't know if there's a word for this. I pump throughout the day and I breastfeed at night and in the morning. Now the reason why I started breastfeeding at night, because I was exclusively pumping for the most part, and the reason why now I've started to breastfeed at night and in the morning is because your girl is just tired. Sometimes I don't have the energy to be getting up and pumping for 30 minutes, because I do pump for 30 minutes because my boobs, like, they're just really engorged. I used to wake up in the middle of the night to pump, but now I just breastfeed because it's so easy and it's the most comfortable breastfeeding position for me. Turn, breastfeed her, and then in the morning, that's when I breastfeed her again, and then we wake up for the day and I'll be pumping throughout the day. Breastfeeding and how you increase your milk supply. So I never purposely increased my milk supply. It just happened. It took about 2 days for my milk to come in, and when I say my milk to come in, I mean like half an ounce, not even a full ounce, okay? I remember going to my lactation consultant and she was like, just try pumping for 15 minutes and see if anything comes out, which by the way, the first time that I pumped, it really hurt. The suction is a lot stronger than like breastfeeding, and obviously I was only 2 days postpartum, so it was like, whoa, like what the heck, but your boobs get used to it. So yeah, I was barely making anything. However, my grandma was always making me oats in the morning, and I feel like that really helped. I was drinking a lot of water, but what really spiked my milk supply and I could really see an increase was when I drank my first body armor. And I remember just drinking one. I was like, you know what, let me just try it out. And I kid you not, within 3 or 4 hours, I felt like I needed to like pump 3 times. Like my boobs hurt so much. They felt so heavy. They felt like rocks, and I was like, whoa, what the heck? Like I don't remember ever feeling my boobs like that. Body armors is what made my milk supply go up and what has sustained them. I don't drink them every day. Occasionally drink them, and when they're out, and my milk supply is still pretty high. What was it like the first day being home? First day that I woke up in my house, I woke up with the weirdest rash on my face. It was like rashes on my cheeks, and they were like 3D, like it was like puffy, like you can literally see like the dent as if someone had like punched me. And I remember my legs were so like big and thick and hard because of how much water I retained. My legs didn't go down for like 2 weeks, and I guess I just had like an allergic reaction to the anesthesia. Even the next day, like being home, I was still draining all of it. So yeah, I was just given a lot of medication when I was at the hospital. It sucked, but at the same time, I didn't feel my C-section, which was one of my biggest fears.
Where's your mother?
Right here. Why she fell asleep?
Yeah, what for? Outside.
See, let's go. Oh, she wants to sleep. She's gonna go under the bed. Sorry, viewers. And yeah, that's it for my video. I hope you learned something. If you're a new mom, if you're an expectant mom, or if you're just watching this because you know someone who's pregnant, I hope it helped you. If you guys want to see more mommy content or just like videos in general from me, make sure you guys subscribe, like, and comment down below. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye.